How's the weather today, Frank? It's a little hot out there, Doug. I'm just saying, man. It's pretty hot out there. Okay, actually, though, triple digits tomorrow? No, Friday. It's triple digits Friday.
Man, sounds like it's heating up out there. Just like this deck I've got. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Jankyard Podcast. I'm Isaac.
I'm Logan.
And thank you, as always, for watching and checking us out. We really appreciate it. Logan?
Yes.
I don't know if you know this, but I've got a deck today.
No way.
I have one of them.
I really hope you do.
One of the decks of all time. There wasn't really a philosophy built around this deck like the other ones. Mostly, it was just, there was an old deck in Standard that I thought was cool, so let's revamp it, and then go down a rabbit hole, and then find some way to win, and oh, cool, we could potentially win on, like, turn 3. That's awesome. Oh, you can win on turn 2 now. Wow, that's really crazy. So this deck has a lot of different routes that it went. I'm going to start with the one that I fleshed out the most. 4 copies of Song of Creation.
I love Song of Creation.
Don't we all?
Yo!
Song of Creation is a fantastic card. For anybody who is not wondering, Logan, would you like to read off the card?
4 mana enchantment, 1, green, blue, red. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. Whenever you cast a spell, draw 2 cards, and at the beginning of your end step, you discard your hand.
This card is really good at drawing cards, but you do have to discard your hand at the end of the turn, so it is not great in that aspect. So all you're trying to do, the main goal of the deck, is to draw until we get to our win con, which is 2 copies of Thassa's Oracle.
Okay, so it's a self-mill.
It is, sort of a self-mill. It's a lot of a self-draw deck, but how we get there, there are multiple different paths. So I'll talk about some more of those throughout the video and talk about more of them towards the end. What I'm going to talk about right now is the deck that I have built that is 100% good to go, ready to play at Friday Night Magic. We're going to start it off with mana generation. We want a little bit of mana generation. We're going to be casting some small stuff. We want to make sure we're getting there. We're going to start off with 4 copies of Springleaf Drum, 4 copies of Moonsnare Prototype, and 4 copies of Catalanal Stalwart. I'm definitely saying that wrong. I apologize. All of these sort of do the same general thing where they're going to tap something else down along with itself to make 1 mana. For the most part, we're favoring towards the creature side, but we have a lot of great options in artifacts as well. Now, that's going to take me to my 8 copies that are my powerhouse cards for this deck. Remember, we want to keep things cheap. We want to try to keep things in artifacts and creatures. There's 1 artifact creature that is 0 mana, that is fantastic. Ornithopter. Yes. We were playing 4 copies of Ornithopter. Ornithopter, fantastic card for this deck. Play a 0 cost. You draw 2 cards. Fantastic thing. You can also tap it down for more mana if you need more mana. Again, great card. The other card. I have looked at this thing for a while, never found a home for it, and now I finally have one. It is 4 copies of Reinforced Ronin.
So it's a 1 mana 2/2 with haste, but at the end of the turn, you put it back in your hand.
Yes.
It's a built-in 2/2 with dash, basically.
Yeah. Now you're looking at it a little confused, which I did as well, but then I took a second and thought about it. He bounces back to the hand at the end step.
Turn. Yeah.
Song of Creation makes you discard your hand at the end step as well.
Right.
So you can stack triggers, discard your hand first, bring your Reinforced Ronin back to your hand. So now you have a card in your hand to get the engine going. Right. If you messed up on the turn you try to get it going, don't worry. You probably found 1 or 2 Ronins. You have them on the field. Sure, you can attack them. Who cares?
But that also means you have a guaranteed card to play on the next turn to draw 2 cards.
Yep. You have a guaranteed card to start the engine back up. It's also an artifact. It's also a creature. This card is a powerhouse in this deck. It is fantastic.
Okay.
Love Reinforced Ronin. Along with that, we're also trying to get more things that can tap for mana. There are a few cards that slot into this. Another great card for this deck is 4 copies of Gilded Goose. 1 mana, you get a 0/2, dude. But he also makes a food. So now you have 2 things.
An artifact.
Yeah, an artifact. You have 2 things that can tap down for mana. We also play 4 copies of Stonecoil Serpent. X mana artifact creature. You can cast it for 1 if you need to keep the mana generation going. You can cast it for 0 if you just want to try to keep the engine going. Pretty flexible. There's also 1 copy of Chamber Sentry. For all intents and purposes, it is another Stonecoil Serpent. It is an X mana artifact.
Both of these X spell creatures, you can also cast for 0 mana.
Yes.
Just to get a Song of Creation trigger.
Exactly.
You don't have to keep them on the board for mana generation if you don't need to, because you can just play them for 0, draw the 2 cards, and keep that going.
And then the last sort of slot I have is more of like the artifacts and more of the sort of keeps it going. We've got 4 copies of Bonesaw, 0 mana artifact, want to keep the engine going. 2 copies of Tormod's Crypt, 0 mana artifact, want to keep the engine going. And then the last spicy pick for the deck, 3 copies of Emery.
I don't know about spicy. I feel like Emery deserves anything that has to do with a lot of really weird, cheap artifacts.
She does. She is, I mean, I'd say she's a spicy pick in the deck just because of her last ability. You're letting you cast artifacts from the graveyard. Straight up, oh, you need to keep the engine going? Cool. There's Emery on the battlefield.
Well, and then, you can cast my Stonecoil Serpent that I cast for 0 mana from the graveyard for 0 mana.
So what this deck is just trying to do is float along with the 1 mana things it's getting. By the time you cast Song of Creation, you have 4 mana at some point somewhere. You can play 2 lands with Song of Creation on the battlefield. You can play an additional land. And you don't need that much mana to cycle through your whole deck at that point. The deck isn't trying to make a ton of mana at once. It is trying to slowly IV drip mana into its wrist or arm just to keep itself going, just to keep the high afloat.
This whole deck is on life support.
This whole deck is on heroin. Other than that, though, like the land base, what's weird about the deck is it runs 16 lands. We're trying to keep the land base really, really tight.
Really? Okay.
Really tight.
I mean, yeah, you don't want to be drawing too many lands.
Yeah, especially because you already have so many mana generation things.
Right. Song of Creation gives you the additional land to play, though.
It does, but you don't want to draw into too many lands. Like, if you do end up drawing into too many lands, whatever, just play a second one. But other than that, we have nothing to do with the lands. But that's the deck.
Okay, so Song of Creation, you're storming to get a bunch of 0 drops out onto the field and keep the engine going with tapping artifacts with other artifacts to gain mana, and drawing all the way through your deck to play a Thassa's Oracle and win the game.
Now, funnily enough, there were a lot of other cards I was looking at. I never considered this next card I'm going to talk about. Reddit user Indication Mediocre 37 on the Pioneer MTG Reddit page talked about another deck that does essentially the same exact thing we're trying to do. It draws a bunch of cards, but it has a different way of doing it. Shout out to you, by the way. Very, very awesome deck. I need you to look up Satoru the Infiltrator.
Satoru the Infiltrator is 2 mana, a blue and a black, for a 2/3 with Menace. Whenever he and or one or more other non-token creatures enters under your control, if none of them were cast or no mana was spent to cast them, draw a card. Okay, so all of the Ornithopters and X-cost creatures give you an extra card on top of the 2 from Song of Creation.
That's essentially what they're playing. They're playing Stonecoil Serpents, they're playing Ornithopters, they're playing Hangerback Walkers just to be an extra 0 mana thing. But on top of that, they're also playing a lot of other just small, cheap things. They're playing 4 Emerys. Awesome deck. I don't want to spoil too much of the deck because I want you guys to go over and look at it because I really do like it. He says he wants to try Case of the Uneaten Feast.
1 white mana. Whenever a creature enters under your control, you gain a life.
Cool. Doesn't matter.
Okay. To solve it, you would have to gain 5 or more life during the turn.
Cool. Doesn't matter. Next
Should be
thing.
pretty easy, though.
Yeah.
Because we can cast so many 0 drops. While it's solved, you can sacrifice this case to give creatures in your graveyard the ability you may cast this card from your graveyard until end of turn. Okay,
So,
that's pretty good.
Straight up, if you can solve this case in 1 turn, you can just keep casting your X-mana artifacts from the graveyard, have them die, and keep bringing them back to keep casting them, to keep going, to keep having fun, to eventually hit Thassa's Oracle, to eventually have 2 mana, to eventually cast it, to eventually have 0 cards in your deck, to eventually be awesome. Shout out to this Reddit user. This deck is incredible. I don't know. You mentioned in the comments, hey, I might put this in there. Put it in there. All right, this is awesome.
This deserves to go in there.
This is the definition of jank. This is the definition of hell yeah.
I want to know what like an opening hand looks like. I mean, it's probably just 2 lands for Satoru, or in the case of Song of Creation, 2 lands and a mana rock.
For Song of Creation, you need Song of Creation in the opening hand.
Because Song of Creation, that deck feels like you'd have to mulligan hard. You need to get the song, or you lose. Your deck does nothing.
I think Song of Creation definitely needs more cards in the hand. Satoru can start off pretty quick.
You know, for all the commander guys out there, so that sounds like a really funny Satoru commander deck, to be honest, where it's the same kind of idea, and you just have a bunch of really cheap or zero cost guys, and you just filter through the deck like crazy. You're already in blue. You can run Lab Maniac, you can run Thassa's Oracle, but this is probably a better 60 card just because you're more consistently getting the zero costs.
There's a lot of different small changes you could do with the deck, but overall, with the one that I created, I really liked it, and I really thought it was a great home for it.
I did when Song of Creation came out, because that was
Ikoria.
I thought, okay, yeah, I was like, I'm pretty sure it was Ikoria, but
Yeah.
that was like one of my favorite standards in a long time.
Oh, yeah, dude, that deck was fantastic.
that
It was
was-
that, and you used Glinthorn Buccaneer.
Yeah.
So you would just draw a hand of 20 cards and then shoot the opponent for 20.
Yeah, all right. Something like that. Can that fit here, or is this?
I think
it just depends on. Do you want to self mill for Thassa's Oracle and have the ability to do that? In Standard, you might not have had that as much. In Pioneer, you might have that more. In Standard at the time, you had Glinthorn, and you can just shoot. That was probably an easier win con than the Oracle was.
so. On the topic of Glinthorn Buccaneer, though, there is probably a home for it, but the problem with the deck I made is it's so refined in what it's trying to do that there's really no wiggle room to have like a plan.
You'd have to reconstruct it a little bit to get.
You would have
get in
to
there.
change up. You'd probably have to take out some of the mana making stuff, take out maybe some of the like 0 mana artifacts, just so you can have a little bit of a better shell around it, and that way you can have a plan B for the deck. Because currently there's not a plan B. It's all
Right. I mean, you
focused on get there, go.
You got me the deck list, and I'm like, all right, there's no interaction.
Not at all.
This is, we're going bigger, we're going home.
For combo decks like this, you have to.
Yeah.
There's no wiggle room.
Yeah, for sure. I approve.
Okay.
Song of Creation, when that came out, that was like, I looked at that and I was like, oh, that's such a funny looking card. Art is beautiful. That's
Art's
still
beautiful.
That's still my sleeve on Arena.
Yep.
Is Song of Creation, but yeah, no, that's a funny deck.
It is. Now, obviously, this deck is very refined in what it's doing. But, like I've said earlier, there is a little bit of wiggle room for other opportunities. So, if any of you want to try out the deck, I highly encourage it. But if you also think there are better builds for it, please let me know. Again, this is something that I've just kind of whipped together. I didn't really play test it at all. Haven't really looked into that too much. I probably am, though. I really do want to play this.
Yeah,
in
this is a
paper.
funny looking one.
In paper, this would be crazy.
For sure.
But if there's a better deck build that you can do out there, go for it. Let me know. I'd love to hear you.
You should play it and go 0-4 with it at Friday Night Magic. All right. Well, give us a like, subscribe.
Thank you for listening, everybody. You can find us on YouTube, which you're probably watching this on. You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok right now.
All right. Thanks for watching.
Have a good one.